We've recently made the final decision that we need to end things from the past, keeping us stuck once and for all, and move into a different and better experience of life that we've been trying to get to for quite some time. Now, all that's left to do is really for us to wait for these endings to kind of play out on their own and tie themselves up in their natural timing and way that it is that they need. However, we're really struggling with that, with letting things end and kind of die in their own natural process, and are getting very worried and anxious about the situation because it's hard for us to logically wrap our mind around what's happening, which may make us want to push, force, and control things at this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo that may not be in our best interest and may complicate our situations when they're really going along quite fine, that we're going to have to learn how to work with. Hi, I'm your astrologer, Brittany, of Ethereal Astrology, helping you to see the larger story of your life. Today, you're watching your astrology horoscope for the collective for the full moon lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo, which occurs on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026 at 6:37 a.m. Eastern Time or 3:37 a.m. Pacific Time. Now, before I hop into this video, I did just want to let you all know that I'm doing a webinar on the 2026 astrological year, which starts in Aries season and goes to Aries season of next year. If you would like to join me for that, I plan on talking about all the major themes of this upcoming year and the major alignments that are going on, the retrogrades. Maybe we'll talk a little bit as well about world events too, and then I'm going to do a sun sign horoscopes as well. So if you want to check that out, please sign up at the link in the description. It's on Saturday, March 7th. Again, we're going to talk about next year. I've talked a lot about, of course, the past few years, obviously, in my videos because I do a lot on the context, but and that I need to note has been a lot about leaving the past behind and ending things. But in this upcoming webinar, I'm really going to focus on what happens once we've left the past behind. What happens once we're in a new and different experience of life? What is that like? Is that as easy as we think, or what unique challenges and benefits might that bring up there as well? So please stay tuned. I hope to see you all there. If there's something in particular you want me to cover, you can also leave that down in the comments too, so that I make sure I can prepare over the course of the next week for that. Now, let's go ahead and let's hop into this video. In order to get started, what I like to do first is place on the chart what it is that I'm going to be talking about in this video so that you can see it and follow along with me. So let me do that now. This video is for that full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. As a result, I've adjusted the chart accordingly. I know that because I've got the moon here in Virgo making an exact opposition to the sun in Pisces. And when the moon opposes the sun, that is what is considered a full moon. Okay, and it's in Virgo because, of course, that's where the moon itself is. Okay, not only that, but I also need to note as well that both the moon and the sun are fairly close to the nodal axis. You can see it right here. And when we get the moon and the sun near the nodal axis, okay, we're going to get an eclipse. And this is a lunar eclipse because it's a full moon and not a new moon here that's happening. So this is a full moon lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. That's going on. And this one is more of a total one because it is in closer proximity to the south node sometimes, and the north node. Sometimes they'll be farther apart, but this one is only within 4 degrees. Okay, now what I like to do next after identifying it on the chart is to share more about the larger themes that may be coming up at this time, at this full moon, that we might need to work through. Okay, and to do that, I like to focus first on the full moon itself. What is the full moon all about? Well, the full moon is kind of like the halfway point of the lunar cycle or the lunar month, when the moon is the farthest that it will go from the sun in that lunar cycle. And because of that, full moons to me are a lot about taking something as far as it can possibly go, or in other words, like completing something, finishing something there. And not only are full moons about that, but because that is when the moon is the brightest in the sky, to me, it also tends to bring things to light that maybe we did not see before, to kind of illuminate something for us. Not only that, but because a full moon is a function of an opposition, as you see it here between the sun and the moon, to me, it also usually involves some sort of decisions as well, right? It's hard to do two opposite things at once. You kind of have to choose. Okay, that's a lot of what oppositions tend to indicate as well. And here we are at the full moon as well. Not only that, but again, thinking of the word full moon, right? I also tend to think of full moons as like doing something more fully as well. And maybe even because it's starting the second half, right, of the lunar cycle, maybe even ending something after we've taken it to its fullest extent, right? So we can focus on especially a new theme at that next lunar cycle that's coming up there as well. Hey, I also want to note too that this is a full moon near the south node as well, which obviously makes it an eclipse, but this is near the south node in particular, right? Sometimes the moon will be near the north node, but this time the moon is on the south node. The south node does tend to be a little bit more of a challenge than the north node. Why is that? Well, the south node tends to indicate traits that we do very naturally and very easily, or that come naturally and easily to us. And while that can feel fine, a lot of times these traits feel so natural and easy and comfortable that we don't want to evolve out of them. We don't want to change or learn and grow. And because of that, they can keep us stuck, kind of, trapped or make our life world smaller than it really needs to be, and can be hard. And because of that, the South Node also tends to indicate needing to either end what's going on here in this sign or fundamentally change it. So because the South Node is here, to me, this full moon is going to lead more towards maybe endings than fully stepping into something at this time, and might also lead me more towards some of the more challenging interpretations of this full moon and of the sign that it's in that we're about to get into. Okay, so now that we've got that here, where we're stepping into or ending something that maybe is keeping us stuck, right? And getting more illumination on that and making some decisions so that we can move forward in a different way. What is it? What is it that we're stepping into, ending, getting insight on, and having to make decisions about? Well, that's going to be Virgo, because that's the sign that it's in. What is Virgo about? Virgo is a Mercury ruled sign. It is a lot about our mind and kind of thinking things through that's happening here. And remember, we've got this as an eclipse on the South Node, which tends to be more unhelpful as well. So I'm going to interpret this not just as like thinking, but I might interpret this as a tendency to overthink things through, think a little too much, a little too hard about some stuff that's going on that we might be stepping more fully into. This overthinking, do you see, getting insight and illumination on maybe how that's a lot for us that we might then need to kind of end or culminate and make decisions about. So do you see how all that's coming together? Not only that, another thought that I'll give you is that a lot of times when we're in the head and doing a lot of thinking, we're not super grounded. So that can create some sort of anxiety or some sort of worry or some sort of insecurity that can also come up as well. So not only at this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo, right, are we feeling even more overthinking, or are we doing even more overthinking that's going on that we need to see and make adjustments about, but that may also lead to even more anxiety, worry, or nervousness as well that we might also need to get clear on and make decisions about to end also. Not only that, but another thought that I'll give you as well is that Virgo is ruled by Mercury, but there's another sign ruled by Mercury that's Gemini. And what makes Virgo different from Gemini is that Virgo is an earth sign instead of an air sign, right? And the earth sign tends to be a little more detailed about things, which again, I'm going to interpret it slightly more challenging with the South Node, can lead to like overly doing the details, overly perfectionistic as well. That's going on, which can also lead to being critical maybe of others, but I think more so towards ourselves at this time, too harder on ourselves than maybe we really need to be, which obviously can contribute to some of these other issues like the worry and the anxiety. So do you see, not only at this full moon are we stepping further into the overthinking and the worry and the anxiety as well, and the perfectionism and the criticism, especially of ourselves. But right, we got to get clear on that, and we got to start making some decisions to end that. that's going on. Not only that, but I should also note as well that with Virgo being an earth sign, earth Mercury, it can also be very practical, very logical. And when I say that, very fact based as well, where it doesn't leave, because again, I'm going negative with the South Node, where it doesn't leave room for things that aren't facts, for serendipity, for intuition, for magic to occur. Because if it doesn't make logical sense in Virgo, it's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not important, right? It doesn't make sense. So not only at this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo, right, are we we're doing even more overthinking, okay, which is leading to worry, anxiety, and over criticism of ourselves. But we also too, are being too logical, too practical, and not allowing enough space for kind of flow and serendipity in our life, or intuition or magic, or whatever else it is that you might call it, that we also need to get illumination on, okay? And make decisions about, to work through. Not only that, but Virgo has to do with our daily habits and our routines, things that we do day in and day out as well. That's going on. And again, with the South Node, I'm going to interpret this more negatively than I would otherwise, right? If we were having a full moon in Virgo without the South Node, I'd be interpreting Virgo a lot differently, okay? Or a lot, more optimistically. But going more negative here, when we've got our daily habits and when we've got our routines and when we've got the South Node there, they can become too much, too busy, right? Too busy on the day-to-day in our daily routine, or doing too much in the day-to-day that's going on that can be overwhelming, so to speak, or hard on us. So that's another thing that we're starting to see here. Too much overthinking, worry and anxiety, being too critical, being too kind of hard on ourselves and too practical, and also maybe doing a little too much, having a very exacting schedule and routine in order to kind of get things done. Not only that, but Virgo also has to do with our job, proper, but to see that in a more conceptual way. So obviously it can apply more to the collective. It can also have to do with like our work and our daily routines, right? Well, our daily routines, but like what we feel like we need to work at in our lives, to improve, right? Because Virgo always wants to improve, to make things better. And with the South Node, it can indicate too much of that. We are working too hard, working too much, doing too much, really more than what needs to be done, and being too hard on ourselves to do the work and making it exacting, right? Perfectionistic and critical in order to make things happen there. That can be a challenge as well, right? And you can even see it as both. You can see it conceptually, working too much, but you can also see it as the job, something with your job, if that applies for some of you, something with your job as well may not be working, right? Or maybe something there, maybe coming up too. Not only that, but other thoughts that I'll give you as well is that Virgo can also have to do with our health, the health of our body as well. That's happening. And sure, maybe you could consider this focusing a little too much on the health of the body and not as much on your emotions, right? Because the body and the emotions are connected. They're all one. You can see it that way as well. But you can also see this too as maybe there's some health issues that we're trying to also get answers to as well, or that we're feeling unwell. There's some health stuff going on that can also be a little bit of a challenge at this time that, again, we're trying to figure out and make decisions on so that we're not sick, right? So that we can feel better and move onwards. Anything else that I want to add here with the Virgo? No, I think that's all that's coming to me for now. So what that means to me, to just summarize that very briefly, is that what's going on at this full moon lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo is that we are, we're starting to kind of overthink things a little too much and be a little too hard on ourselves and do a little too much work than what's needed. Which may make us worry and anxious, or maybe make us sick and unwell and not feel good, and keep us stuck, that we're trying to get illumination on to see what's really happening, and then make choices to kind of either end, change, or resolve that so that we're no longer falling back into these old habits and can move forward in a different way. Okay, and that's what I'm going to say there. Now, before I move in to give you more details about this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo and how it's going to play out, I do want to go back in time for a minute, more than a minute. It's going to be way more than a minute before I go forward to give you more of the context of how we got here, because we have a full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo not an eclipse. We have a full moon in Virgo every year, although it's not an eclipse. And to me, what really makes each lunation different than the next one is all the other alignments that are happening around it. So I'm going to go do that, but I want you to be forewarned. This is going to be very, very long because we're now at the end of the astrological year. When the new astrological year begins in Aries season, I'm going to not talk about some of this stuff and cut it down a lot. But this is going to be very long. Now, if you do not have the time or are not interested, totally cool. Skip it. I've got the timestamps down below in the description box. You can get right into what this full moon is all about and more of the details. But I'm going to go here now. Also, hang in there with me. It's possible I may get some dates and things wrong because this section has gotten so long in Mercury's retrograde. Okay, so I'm going to try my best to stay on track here, but let's do it. The first thing I'm going to talk about is going to be January to April of 2020. We had a very rare significant alignment that was a challenge happen, which was Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn in the South Node coming conjunct towards the middle to late degrees of Capricorn. This was rare because Saturn and Pluto only come conjunct about every 35 years, I believe, and not always with Jupiter there. Which makes it even more rare, and always with the South Node there as well. And it's a challenge because Saturn and Pluto are considered malefic planets. The South Node can also is a challenge. And Jupiter, it was in Capricorn, a sign it doesn't like. That wasn't very helpful either. So a very rare challenge. What was that rare challenge? Well, Saturn can indicate kind of a stuckness in our life, and in Capricorn in our entire life direction in the way that it was going, and maybe feeling like depressed or unhappy or down. And Pluto is about change, and usually some big change, and it's usually an ending first that needed to happen, which is again a challenge in order to get out of this sad energy, get out of these things that we don't like, and ultimately create something different and better. Okay, that was hard that we were beginning to understand Jupiter and realize not only that, but the reason why we did not like our life at that time and needed to make some changes as well is because Pluto was there. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. Pluto, which focuses on Pluto and the nodes, and Pluto tends to indicate areas in our life where we're kind of doing too much or doing something in an unbalanced way. And it was in Capricorn. Capricorn does have a lot to do with responsibility, with work as well, a little bit kind of similar to Virgo, where the full moon lunar eclipses, because they're both earth signs. Okay. But also has to do with that responsibility, also has to do with tradition and structures and rules and status and success. So a big part of the reason why we didn't like our life around that time and needed to change it is because we were focused too much on tradition, rules, status, and success and work instead of what truly felt fulfilling for us, what truly would light our own heart up, and fill our own tank up and make us feel good emotionally. That was going on. And we had neglected our emotional needs, especially because wherever Pluto is, we tend to neglect the opposite sign that it's in here as well. And that's why we were making the changes to get out of all of this stuff built on traditional and responsibility that wasn't truly in alignment with who we were, which was hard to do because it's hard to end things you've been doing for a while, whether you like them or not. That then leads me now to the next alignment that I'm going to mention. And that next alignment, I'm going to fast forward a whole bunch just to save us some time. And I'm going to fast forward to an alignment that occurred at the beginning of the last year, which is still this astrological year, which was April of 2025. Okay, we had a new moon solar eclipse over here in the sign of Aries. Okay, new moons are new beginnings. Solar eclipse is superpower. That Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, about new beginnings and fresh starts. So in one way, one interpretation, this was us trying to begin a new experience of life after spending the past 5 years ending things that we did not like, that were based too much on tradition and responsibility and didn't really resonate with who we are. Not only that, but I should also note as well that not only is Aries the first sign of the zodiac about new beginnings, it's also Mars ruled about action, about doing things. And again, the first sign is about new things. So it's not just doing things in any old way. It's about doing things in a new way than whatever the way we were doing them before, which was too serious, too traditional, too responsible, all of that. Okay. And I think to do them in a different way, that is more Aries in some sense, impulsive, passionate, and also the opposite point of Pluto, right? Which is important to evolutionary astrology, which is more in touch with our emotions. So that's what we started there, April 2025. Okay, I feel like I've ended enough stuff that I did not like, that now I can create new things that I like by doing them in a different way, by acting in a different way, because you want a different result. You got to do things in a different way that's more in touch with my emotions and passions and impulses. Okay, which is really what this whole past year has been about. Since Aries season defines the theme for the entire 12 months after it through all the other signs, with it being the beginning of the cycle. But we're going to move on anyways. The next alignment I want to mention is going to be the new moon that came after that in that next sign over of Taurus, May of 2025. New moon in Taurus. New moons are about new beginnings. Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac, fixed sign, about staying fixed in something or sustaining something. What are we sustaining? What we started in Aries season, which are these new behaviors to honor more of our emotions, our passions, and our impulses. Because it's Earth, it's also a little bit of a slower sign. So this may have felt like a slower time because sometimes we have to slow down in order to really stay fixed in something. And because I think doing things that are more in touch with our emotions had us doing less responsibilities than we were before, which sometimes makes things feel slower because we're just not doing as much as we were. But there was a little bit of that going on there. And that then leads me to the next alignment I want to mention happening about a month later, and that next sign over here in Gemini, new moon in Gemini in June of 2025. New moons are about new beginnings. Gemini is about our mindset. It's also about adapting to something, making something more familiar. And so I think that's what we're doing. What were we trying to adjust our mindset and adapt to? These new behaviors based more on our passions that I think we were able to do at that time. That then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention. About a month later, the next sign over, somewhere around July of 2025, you get a new moon in Cancer. New moons are about new beginnings. Cancer is about something becoming more firmly grounded and planted within our being, more a part of ourselves and our emotions there as well. And not only that, understanding more of what our emotions need, because that's fundamental. Remember, to these new behaviors that we're trying to adopt is that they're in touch with our emotions. So in July of 2025, at that new moon in Cancer, we started to get more grounded in these new behaviors to honor our emotions and understand more and more what our emotions actually wanted and needed in order to act in the best way, right? And do things in the best way that we needed. That then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention. And now I'm going to switch to adding in some of the full moons in regards to this. And the full moon after that new moon in Cancer was 2 weeks after in the opposite sign of Capricorn, also somewhere I'm going to say around July of 2025, which I need to note was in the same spot that we had that Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, South Node conjunction in 2020. Hey, what is that about? Full moons are about stepping into something more fully that we've been working towards for a while, right? Making decisions about those things. It's in Capricorn. Capricorn's the highest part of the chart, very public, something being publicly seen. It's also Earth, something more tangible, more practical that's happening. And it's also about our life direction. So what I think was going on in July of 2025 is that now that we had become more grounded and rooted in these different behaviors that are more in aligned with our emotions, is that we were trying to make decisions to act more publicly with this newfound, right, sense of self. And with these newfound behaviors, we're trying to act on them more so that they're more publicly seen in the world and are more tangibly seen in our life. Not just something inside that we're working out, but so that they're actually having, maybe to use another Capricorn word, consequences in our real life to kind of adjust things there. Okay, that then leads me now to the next alignment that I want to mention, which happened 2 weeks after that. We had a new moon in Leo, the next sign after Cancer, here in August of 2025. However, Mercury was also retrograde at that time in the same sign of Leo near that new moon. New moons are about new beginnings. Leo is a lot about courage, bravery, and boldness. It's also a fixed sign about staying fixed and continuing in something. However, Mercury was retrograde at that time, which can create some challenges there. When Mercury goes retrograde, it can indicate some blockage to the energy that it's in, or just still not being ready to fully embrace it there, and can create some sort of like doubt or insecurity. And so I think that's what happened in August of 2025. We became the cowardly lion. We had just taken a big move, right? A big decision to act boldly, like more boldly in this different way that honors our emotions in the real world so that it could come to bear in our actual situation. And after we do that and kind of make this move, we then get scared. We then get scared about like being so bold about what we're doing that we doubt it. And I think we begin to hold back, hold off, or go back on some of the things that we did and kind of not follow through there. That then leads me on. The next alignment happened 2 weeks after that full moon in the opposite sign of Aquarius, also somewhere around August of last year. Full moons are about stepping into things, right? We've been working towards for a while. Aquarius is not about breaking free from things that were keeping us stuck. It's also an air sign, kind of about detaching from some of the emotions, especially the more challenging ones. So what I think happened at that full moon in Aquarius is that we finally were able to detach from some of the fears and insecurities about this new approach so that they weren't bothering us as much or holding us back as much from doing things in this different way. That then leads me now to that next alignment that I want to mention. That next alignment that I want to mention, which happened about 2 weeks after that over here in the sign of Virgo, which is connected, right, to this full moon that we have in the same sign here. So you might want to pay more attention to this one, but that's what we've got 2 weeks after that. What was that all about? Well, new moons are about new beginnings, and Virgo is a lot about our habits and our routines, doing something day in and day out. Whether right in a more practical way, whether it feels good or not, we're doing it regularly, habitually. And I think, of course, that pertains back to what happened in Aries season, which was these new behaviors that are based more in our emotions. So that's what happened in September 2025. Overcome some fear now around acting in this different way. Now I'm going to go back to acting in this different way that's honoring more of my passions on a more habitual basis. Not only when it feels good, not only when I'm ready, but day in and day out to practice it. And I also need to know Virgo's not a flashy sign either. So it wasn't like I'm going to take big, bold risks. It was like, no, I'm going to start small. I'm going to go back to doing these new behaviors, small little ways, day in and day out, so that I can ease my way kind of into them. That then leads me now to the next alignment that I want to mention. About 2 weeks after that, also in September of 2025, in the opposite sign, it was a full moon in Pisces, and that one was a lunar eclipse there, okay, on the North Node. Full moons are about stepping into things more fully. Eclipses superpower that. I like the North Node being very forward-moving, progressive, momentum. And it's in Pisces. And Pisces is a lot about hope and faith. And I thought with it being a full moon near the North Node, that this was more of an active hope and faith here. And when I say active, not just having hope and faith, taking a leap of faith, taking more bold moves and more bold risks to act in accordance with our emotions after overcoming our fears, right, in the few weeks prior, and doing more of these behaviors in a more habitual daily basis, right? We were doing them little by little, and now we're going to take a big move here to do that. Okay, that then leads me now to the next alignment that I want to mention, which was another new moon. We had 2 new moons in Virgo last year as well. So this one might also be relevant, of course, to this video and what this is for. So we're going to look at that. And that was in October of 2025. However, this next new moon in Virgo was also an eclipse, okay, because that one was closer to the South Node there in the sign of Virgo. What was that really all about? Well, again, it was an eclipse in Virgo on the South Node, very similar to what we've got going on now. Which was a little bit more of a challenge. Virgo, when it's negative, can indicate overthinking, doubt, worry, insecurity, overworking as well. That's going on, or just like a lot of work that was happening. So what that could have indicated is that around like October of last year, we began to feel as though we began to feel as though we had just taken a big leap of faith to act more in accordance with our emotions, but that it was just overwhelming for us. Maybe it required a lot of work, and we began to get to overthink and to doubt what we had just done, this leap of faith that we really needed to work through there. So that we didn't stay stuck in those things. And that then leads me now to the next alignment that I want to mention, which was about 2 weeks after that, somewhere also around October, I think, if I'm getting the dates correctly. If I'm not, I'm sorry. But it was somewhere around there, September, October of last year. We had a full moon in Aries. Full moons are about stepping more fully into things. Aries is boldness and courage. It's also the warrior, the fighter. It's going to fight anything keeping us stuck. And it's not about perfectionism and thinking. It's about following our instincts and impulses. So what I think happened at that full moon around October 2025 in Aries is that we said, you know what, I can't let this overthinking continue to get the best of me, continue to bring me down, this overworking, this perfectionism. I just have to go for it. I just have to keep doing these things in this new way, even if it's a lot of work, even if it's not perfect, even if I'm worried, and I just have to fight through it in order to keep going in this different way. That then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention around November. Yeah. Was it in November or October? Maybe, I'm going to go October here. It was somewhere around there. October of 2025, we had a new moon in the sign of Libra, the next sign over. New moons are all about new beginnings, new energy, and fresh starts. Libra is a lot about balance, common balance, where we're not doing too much of one thing or too little of one thing. And I think in this case, it was in our actions, right? With our thinking and all of that. We needed to find balance so that we weren't doing too much, in this new approach that was honoring our emotions, and could kind of find like more of an equilibrium, more of a balance there. So it wasn't so much a shock to our system or so back and forth with the pendulum on everything, throwing our life into disarray. Not only that, but we might have also started to realize, since Libra is a relationship sign, that we eventually need to figure out how to factor relationships into this new approach, because we hadn't been thinking about relationships really prior to this point when it comes to these new behaviors. That then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention. November of last year, 2025, we had a full moon in Taurus. Full moon's about stepping into things we've been working towards. Taurus, similar to Libra, is also a Venus-ruled sign about calm and ease. So I think we were finding more of a calm and an ease with these new behaviors, that were honoring more of our emotions, so that we weren't kind of overdoing it or feeling overwhelmed or all of that, which I think was very good, even though Taurus is not a relationship sign. We hadn't really worked out the relationships yet. That then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention, maybe somewhere around November, I believe 2025, we had a new moon in Scorpio, with Mercury also retrograde near Scorpio at that time. New moons are about new beginnings. Scorpio is now about relationships, is about money, is about more of a permanent change. And with Mercury retrograde there, something was not quite right in regards to relationships and money and how they fit into this new approach that we really needed to take the time to do. That could have been a little bit of a challenge, really trying to figure out how relationships and money factor into a new world in which we're acting on our impulses, right? Because relationships might not like that we're acting on our emotions and impulses. And it's hard to make money when you're just doing whatever your emotions want all the time, right? So we were trying to figure that out there. That was a little bit of a challenge. That then leads me now to the next alignment. 2 weeks after that, full moon Gemini, November, somewhere right around there. Might have been moving more towards December. Yes, we're moving more towards December now, I believe. 2025, we had a full moon in Gemini. Full moon stepping into things. Gemini is a lot about conversations there that we needed to have more fully. And I think with relationships, and I think about money, that in order to figure out where they all fit into this new approach. So we were doing a lot of thinking there about how to finally fix a lot of these things that were still not together. That then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention in December, 2 weeks later, the new moon in Sagittarius over here. New moons are about new beginnings. Sagittarius is a lot about wisdom and understanding, about kind of how to bring all of this stuff together. It's also about new and different things that maybe we're trying to manifest as well. And that new moon, it was kind of in a hard spot. It was like the last degree, square Neptune and Saturn. there. And so I think that was a challenge there. We felt like we were doing like everything that we needed to do to really bring everything together, but that we still weren't maybe getting the answers about what to do that we needed, and that things still weren't falling into place and new things still weren't coming together in the way that we might like, which was kind of hard. Okay, that then leads me now to the next alignment I want to mention. January of this year, 2026, we had a full moon in Cancer, full moon stepping more fully into something. Cancer is a lot about feeling more grounded. It is also about our emotions, and Jupiter was there about understanding more of that, which is really what this new approach to life was all about. So what I think, and also too, is about things from the past kind of coming back, and cycles, Cancer has a lot to do with that kind of playing themselves out. So I think what happened in January of this year is that we finally did start to get more understanding about what kind of needed to happen to bring relationships and money and all of that together, and started to feel like maybe as though things were starting to move a little bit, or like things from our past were starting to make more sense about what needed to happen. That then leads me to the next alignment. January also of this year, 2026, we had a new moon in Capricorn. New moons, new beginnings. Capricorn is a lot about managing and structuring things. I think especially our relationships and money as well. So I think we started to manage and structure our relationships and money, not to go above and beyond, not to do them in a new way, but just to get them in a little bit of a better order and more manageable. And I think we did that because I should have mentioned at that full moon in Cancer, we realized we needed to feel safe, and that a big reason why we weren't able to move forward with relationships, money, and these new behaviors is because we didn't feel safe enough to fully honor our emotions. And so in January of this year, we began to kind of manage our money and relationships a little bit better and put more boundaries and structures in there so that we could feel safe enough to act more in this different way and kind of finish out these old cycles. That then leads me now to the next alignment that I want to mention, which was, where did we go? I think it's going to be over here, a full moon in Leo. Right? Was that the order of things? A full moon in Leo in February. I think we're going to go there. February of this year, 2026. Full moons are about stepping into things. Leo's about risks, taking risks, bold, courageous. And I think what happened then is because we felt like we were safer now and we had managed our resources and our money better, we felt like now we could take the more bold moves, I think, to finally finish acting in this different way that it is that we needed and bring more things together, to really finish a lot of things that we kind of were doing at the end of last year, September, October, November, right around there. That then leads me to the next alignment I want to mention, which was the new moon solar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius. I believe that was just 2 weeks ago, also in February here. New moons are about new beginnings. Solar eclipse is superpower. That Aquarius was about breaking free and leaving things behind so that we can move into different experiences. So I think that was us continuing more and more and more of that process of breaking free from things, especially with relationships and money and all of that, that was keeping us stuck from behaving in this different way so that we could behave in this different way. And was us kind of, tying up more things from the end of last year that weren't working out to kind of bring them more together. That then leads me now to this video, for which this is for, right? The full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo here, March of 2026. And that is us maybe falling back into, again, a little bit more doubt and worry and insecurity around this change that we're making to leave the past behind and step into new behaviors that we're going to have to work through. And remember, we've already been through this before. We had an eclipse bringing up a very similar theme about 6 months ago. So to work through now with more wisdom, more understanding, and more practice than we had the last time we did it as well. Okay, so that's what I'm going to say there. Maybe to summarize that, before we move on, is that what is going on at this time is that we're trying to get out of an old experience of life we did not like, based too much on tradition and rules, into a new one we like better, more in alignment with our emotions. And the way that we're trying to do that is by acting in very different ways in order to get a different result. It's been a hard journey. especially all this year, of trying to figure out what these different ways are and of getting used to them and of conquering our fears and our overthinking and our anxiety and working out the relationships and money in order to get everything together. It's been a really long journey, a little bit of a hard process, but over the course of the past few weeks, we finally started to do it, to act in these different ways, to leave the past behind, to move in these different experiences. But even though we're doing it, there's still a little bit of doubt, worry, and insecurity creeping in that we're just going to have to manage one last time, I think, before we move forward there. Okay, and that's it. Man, I can't wait till I don't go over that anymore, I'll tell you. Ben, that's coming soon. But all right, now let's hop into this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo and what it's about. In order to start, I'm actually going to go to a few other alignments that are happening at this time before I zoom in on the full moon. So we're going to do that. I'm going to go here again to Saturn conjunct Neptune in the sign of Aries. It did start to happen at that last new moon we had 2 weeks ago, but it's still going on now here. As you can see, it's, 1 degree apart. This is a very significant alignment. It's very significant because it's fairly rare. It doesn't happen that often. I believe it's also 36 years, right? Similar to Saturn conjunct Pluto. Okay, so a very rare one, doesn't happen that often. That's bringing some sort of rare shift or rare change in our life. That's very significant. And it's in Aries. It did occur exactly at the first degree of the first sign of the zodiac, right? Aries is the first sign, which indicates Aries' new beginnings as well, and kind of doing things in different ways and kind of a different energy. And Saturn is bringing more of a commitment and more of a resolve towards that, towards new experiences in life, towards doing things differently, and towards making that more of a reality, which Saturn can do with. Neptune is there, which also has to do with kind of like our higher self and our soul, kind of also desiring that as well. So I'm desiring that as well, and making this more, I need to note with these two together, more of a permanent thing. Like, I believe that for many years, really since 2020, we've been trying to get into a new and different experience of life. Well, it's Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries that's finally going to make that happen, because deep down, our higher self wants it to happen now and is ready in a way we weren't before. And because now we have the commitment, the determination, and the resolve to finally actually do it. Okay, that changes everything. That changes a lot. Okay, so keep that in mind there. Not only that, the next alignment I want to look at is going to be Mars. Now, Mars is at the first degree of Pisces at the time of this full moon, and I'm going to talk about that. But I also want to note that in the few days before this eclipse, Mars was at the very last degrees of Aquarius, making a square to Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So I want to talk about that as well, which it's still hanging around. It's out of sign, right? But it's still in that 3 degrees square to Uranus. So I want to talk about that as well. What is that about? Well, Mars is about action and doing things. It's in Aquarius and it's aspecting Uranus, which are both related. And Aquarius and Uranus have a lot to do with breaking free from things that have been keeping us stuck. And it also has to do with creating other things that are more authentic to us and are going to be better for our future. Okay, not only that, but Uranus and Aquarius can also maybe bring somewhat of like an unexpected or sudden nature up about that as well that needs to happen. And squares sometimes can bring up decisions, especially with Saturn there it factoring in at the first degrees of Aries, that Mars can really push. Okay, so this can bring more of a push to make a decision to break free from more things keeping us stuck from the past, right? So that we can step into this new and different experience of life that we've got more of a firm commitment to now, to make a reality that our soul is wanting. Not only that, but I need to note that Mars is the last planet to come through that square to Uranus within the past few weeks. Okay, the Sun, Mercury, and Venus have all been through that spot. So with Mars now being the last planet to go through that spot for a while, this is not just us doing another thing, like making a decision to do another thing, to break from something else, to create. No, this is the last one, the final one. Do you understand? Here, it's the final thing, that decision, action that needs to be done to break free from old stuff and move forward after a series of decisions and actions we may have already taken over the course of the past few weeks there. Not only that, but I also want to note, right, Mars It correlates naturally to Aries, right? They're correlated where Saturn and Neptune now are. And Aries, again, is that first sign of the zodiac, and it's a cardinal sign. It changes, cardinal signs change the direction that the chart is going in, right? The circle is going in. So cardinal signs literally change the direction of our lives. So this final decision, final action, or this thing to make something final, right? There's something finalizing something. Okay. That's going on is going to be the thing that's finally going to start to like turn our whole life in this different direction that we've just been dreaming about since 2020 and maybe even before then. Okay, so that's how these two relate. To bring that together before I add more is that finally over the course of the past few weeks, our higher self and our emotion, we're ready. Our higher self in our soul, maybe I won't say our emotions, our higher self and our soul is finally ready to move into a different experience of life that we've been trying to create for a while. And we finally have the resolve, the commitment, the determination, and the practicality in order to make that happen, in order to behave in the right way. And because we finally have like the stuff to make it happen, we are realizing we need to make one final decision or final action in order to seal the deal. Right? Or to finalize something in order to finally come out of the past once and for all and create something else that's going to be better for us once and for all, which, right, could have come up suddenly or could have come up unexpectedly. Okay? But recently, around the time of this eclipse, we're doing that one last thing that really needs to be done in order to make this transition to turn our lives around. The next thing I want to mention is going to be Mars itself. I'll mention it since we were on that, being actually in the sign of Pisces now at the time of this full moon and technically not in Aquarius. What is that? Again, Mars is about our action. It's also about our drive, our motivation, and just where the action is happening in our lives. And it's in Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac about endings, and it's a mutable sign about transitioning, right? And more so transitioning out of one thing because it's about an ending and ultimately into another thing when, say, we get in, more things get into Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac. So this is us, right? Committing to finally getting into a new experience once and for all and making the final break with the past in order for that to happen, right? Maybe suddenly and unexpectedly. And that final break with the past leading us now into a transitory phase, leading us now into a transitionary phase out of one thing into another thing, okay? Making it finally happen. Okay, not only that, but other things I'll say about Mars and Pisces as well is that Pisces is a lot about surrendering, letting go, going with the flow, and trusting in the process. Because a lot of times ending things, right? Transitioning out of one thing and into another requires a lot of letting go. If you're going to transition out of something, you have to let it go, right? And because a lot of times this process of transitioning, sometimes it just needs time. It doesn't necessarily need a lot of force per se. Sometimes these things just need some time to clean themselves up, especially after we already made that firm commitment, and that firm final break in order to do so. So it's also us trying to cultivate more of that flow and trust and surrender and allowing the process and letting it occur at this time. Okay. Now I think that that's a fine thing, right? Mars is fine in Pisces, but I should note it is at 0 degrees, the very first degree of Pisces. And the first degree can be a little youthful, in my opinion, and not as refined. And again, is the beginning of a process, right? And in this case, the 0 degrees of Pisces is the beginning. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac of the end. This is the beginning of the end, right? It's the beginning of a lot of old things finally tying themselves up once and for all and getting closure on that. And even though we are in that transitory phase, finally out of one thing and into another, it's still a phase that is still going to take more time to complete, that hasn't reached its peak maturity resolution yet. And not only that, but again, Pisces is about this flow, right? And this trust and surrender. And with it being at the baby degree, 0 degrees, we're getting a little bit of trust and flow, but there's a lot more to go before we have this mature acceptance of the situation and of what needs to happen. But we're still getting it, okay? So that's what I want to say there with that alignment. Maybe to bring all of that together is that we finally are committing more to creating a new and different experience in life in a more real way with more determination and more resolve. And because of that, we're finally making our last final break with anything from the past that's keeping us stuck so that we can finally move on and turn this whole ship around in our life, which I think is meant to be a good thing, that is then opening us up to a big transition now, a big transition where the old things are leaving as a result of this final decision. And ultimately, we're going to get to something new and different, and where we're letting go of a lot of things and allowing that process to happen, even though there's still more time that process needs to play out. That's going on. Okay, that then leads me now the next thing that I want to mention as well. I'm going to go back to Venus. Venus in Pisces. Venus has been in Pisces for a few weeks now, but it's still there. Okay, and it did, I need to note, before this eclipse, make a conjunction with Mercury retrograde there. So I'm going to mention. I'm gonna talk about Venus and Pisces briefly, and I want to talk about this because this is actually a really beautiful thing. Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, where it really loves to be, functions very well. It's good to have Venus exalted. That's because Venus is about relationships. It's about money. It's about our own sense of self. And when it's in a spot it likes to be, those things function better. They function more easily. That can be really helpful. And in Pisces, how are they going to function more easily? There's going to be a lot more compassion and grace. That's what Pisces has to do with here. That's going on. There's going to be a lot more trust and surrender. And again, with Pisces being the last sign of the zodiac about endings, an immutable sign about transitionings, to transition our relationships, our money, and our own sense of self with more compassion, grace, ease, and flow that we are feeling, right? And that other people and things are feeling as well. That can be quite nice. That's coming on to kind of make all of this happen easier. So to continue with the story, here at this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo, we have a more firm resolve within ourselves to finally create a new and better experience of life once and for all, with more determination and grit and practicality. And because of that, we're doing it, making the final break, the big kahuna, the final break with these things from the past so that we can finally move into these new experiences and turn everything around, which is working. This final break is working to then start this transition process out of one thing into another, to tie up all of this stuff, which requires a lot of surrender and requires a lot of letting go. And this process, this transitory process out of one thing, which requires a lot of surrender and letting go, is working well in a certain sense, Relationships and money are transitioning out of one thing, and there is a sense of compassion and grace and flow as it's coming together, where things are, maybe to put it another way, going more easily and naturally with relationships and money to facilitate this ending that is happening here that's needed. Okay, that then leads me now to the next alignment that I want to mention, which is the probably the most important one, where more of the challenges are going to come from, and that's going to be here with Mercury. Mercury is retrograde at the time of this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. And of course, this is important because Mercury is the ruler of the South Node. It's the ruler of the South Node here. With the South Node in Virgo, Virgo correlates to Mercury, has extra importance. Over this lunation, right, it's the ruler of the moon too, with the moon being there as well, and it's coming into a conjunction with the sun. So some important things going on here with Mercury. What is this? This to me, I'm going to interpret in a little bit more of a challenge, because Mercury does not like to be in the sign of Pisces where it is. And of course it's retrograde, which means it's appearing to move backwards in the sky, which is not how it normally appears. That can be hard. What is the challenge? Well, Mercury has to do with our logical mind. It also too sometimes has to do with our daily routines, right? Since it correlates to Virgo. And Mercury does not like to be in the sign of Pisces. Okay, why doesn't Mercury like to be in the sign of Pisces? Well, because it's what Mercury stands for is diametrically opposed to what Pisces stands for, right? Mercury is about logic. It's about, right, our conscious mind, thinking things through, and it's about daily routines and work. Pisces is opposite that. Pisces is about intuition. It's about emotion. It's about magic, serendipity, things you can't explain. It's also about resting and being at ease and just allowing things to kind of happen naturally. So there is this struggle here that's going on between our logical mind and the way that we think we should behave on a daily basis with what is actually happening right now in our lives. And I say the Pisces is what is actually happening right now in our lives, because Mars is there, Venus is there, the sun is there, right? It's like the Pisces is happening. It's our logical mind, maybe to put it in a different way for you, our logical mind cannot comprehend what is going on here, cannot comprehend that we're finally coming at transitioning. We're in the process of transitioning out of one thing and into another. Okay. It cannot comprehend that because why? Because we've been stuck so long, right? Sometimes Mercury can indicate habits. Virgo, habits. We've been stuck so long in trying to get out of one thing. We've been stuck so long in trying to do that, that now for all of a sudden, things to actually be transitioning after we've been trying so hard, we have a habit of like trying to make it happen, feels really weird. You know what I mean? Not only are we having a hard time accepting that these things are transitioning because we have a habit of trying to get here for so long and it never working out, but I think too, there's something, especially with Venus still in Pisces, of these things happening easily, right? Relationships and money are transitioning. I think they need a little bit of effort. I'm going to say that. I do think they need a little bit of effort, especially with the Virgo stuff going on, but I don't think they need a whole lot of effort. They don't need a heavy hand. And I think logically, Mercury, we're having difficulty also accepting that. How can things be ending and transitioning in our life? And we've been trying for years to make this happen and it hasn't happened. And we've just got a habit of like trying to make all this stuff go, but also it doesn't logically make sense that like this would be so easy. Like, why is now everything so easy when it wasn't before? Like, shouldn't I have to do more? Shouldn't I have to work more? Shouldn't I have to work harder? Shouldn't I have to be more stern? Shouldn't I have to be more detailed? Shouldn't I have to say more things to people? You know, like, I don't understand, why is this happening now when it didn't happen years ago? And why is it happening so easily now? You know, there's still this sense of like not getting it, not getting it here. You know, not only that, but endings sometimes are just different, you know, which is what Pisces is about ending things. Ending things are not about trying to control and make things happen. And you got to put things here and put things there. The nature of an ending is to just let go, right? You just have to let go. You're not trying to build something. You're not trying to create something. You're kind of doing the opposite. You're dismantling something. Something's dissolving. And the way to dismantle something is kind of just like, let it kind of happen on its own, or it's not as hard. It's not as hard to like take something apart as to when you're putting something together, you know? And I think we're also having a hard time just like understanding that, like we're trying to operate at an ending as if we're trying to build something when they're two fundamentally different phases and things here that's going on in our life that I think is what the difficulty really is. Do you see? Can't logically understand, you know, why this transition is finally happening now and it wasn't before, and why it's so easy and why it doesn't require me to like have to do a whole bunch of stuff. You know, that's a lot. Not only that, maybe I'll give you another thought too, is like, I think as well, right? Remember I said with that Mars square Uranus alignment, we made the final break from the past, you know, as well. And I think when something becomes final, there's something kind of scary about it, you know, that can kind of scare your logical mind when you get that final commitment to something. It's like, oh my gosh, this is for real now. This is for real now. I can't go back. Because when you make a final decision, when you say the final thing, you can't go back anymore. And so I think there's also some anxiety there of like, oh shoot, I did the thing. You know, now what? You know, that's kind of startling us. I think too, this transitory process maybe feels like a lot. Maybe especially because when you make a big decision, not only is it scary, but it feels like a big moment. Whether it was a small decision or not, it can feel big because it was final. So I think there's also something difficult with that, because keep in mind as well, Mercury is a very small planet, okay? And Pisces used to be correlated to Jupiter before Neptune was discovered. Jupiter's a big planet. So I think there's also something like that of like there's a transition in my life, and then a final decision that I made, whether the decision was big or small, doesn't matter. It feels big to my soul, to my emotions. It feels big to my emotions. And I'm having problems processing that in my small, finite mind. You know, that can also happen here. So I think there's also a little bit of like an overwhelmed type feeling that's coming in. Not only that, I'll give you another thought about this as well, is that spirit, Pisces can also have to do with our intuition and with spirit, and maybe things coming in from our higher mind. I think we can also be getting a lot of messages from spirit and our higher mind about kind of what is going on in our life, what happened in the past, and maybe what's coming up. And I think we're also very confused. Like we're finding that overwhelming as well, because we're not in the past, but we're not yet in the future either. So there's just a lot of things that are hard for us to comprehend. Like, I'm not where I was, but I'm not where I want to be. And then I'm getting all these weird intuitive messages that I don't really know how to make sense of, because I'm not there yet. I'm like in this process. That can be hard. Not only that, but Pisces is a water sign. It has to do with our emotions. So this can also make our emotions a little out of sort as well, a little dysregulated emotionally, because all of this just feels like bigger than what we can handle. That's going on, right? There's a feeling of like too big than what I feel like I can handle with everything that's happening, even though it doesn't need a lot of effort as much as we think. Okay. So that's what I'll say there. Okay. We're finally ready to move into a new experience. Because of that, we're making a final decision to make that last break with the past, to move forward, which is actually working, to now begin this transitory process once and for all, out of one thing into another thing, to kind of clean everything up, which is just a matter of letting go and allowing it to occur. And relationships and money and our sense of self are all adjusting as a result of this, actually quite nicely, quite easily and naturally, without us having to do much. But because, this is finally happening when we've been trying to do it for years and it hasn't occurred, and now all it has, and because it's happening so easily and naturally, and because we're in such a weird in-between space, not in the old, but not in the new, and because it feels so significant and there's a lot of emotions going on, we're feeling very confused and like having a really hard time like making sense of logically what is going on, and we're just, our mind is just blown wide open, with what's happening. That is hard for us to get a handle on. Okay. That then leads me now, of course, to what this video is about. That full moon itself, a lunar eclipse here in Virgo, conjunct the South Node, which again is a challenge. What is the challenge here? Well, the South Node can bring too much of an attachment towards something that's unhealthy. To me, the South Node is also like our baseline, our normal, here, how we feel. And Virgo is going to throw us back into the overworking, right? Because Virgo is about work and our daily routines, the overworking, doing too much, okay, working too hard, the trying to be too perfect, too detailed, too disciplined, too critical of ourselves, the overthinking, the doubt, the worry, and the anxiety. It's going to bring all that back to kind of rear its head. That's going on. Maybe it's some weird conversation, especially with the Mercury retrograde, Virgo being a Mercury ruled sign. It's going to bring that. And I need to note, maybe on another thought for a minute, to me, some of that is correlated to like the Pluto in Capricorn. I know Pluto's no longer there, but it was in 2020, which kind of started us on this whole journey. And Pluto in Capricorn is too much Capricorn, which is a lot about the being practical and the being, realistic and the being, the hard work and all of that. And so this can also throw us a little bit back into that of us now. Our life is changing. If you can't tell, it's starting to change to be something very different than what it once was. And it's hard, and it's blowing our mind wide open, and our mind can't understand. Why is this happening? None of it makes sense. It's not what it used to be, and therefore is holding on to these it's like the dying of the old habits, is like holding on to these old habits of what we feel safe with, the South Node of what we feel comfortable, which is the overwork, which is the overwork, the overthinking, the anxiety, maybe the being too rigid, rules, structured, traditional, maybe even throwing us back into the status and success, throwing us back into all of that again and it's like the death throes, sometimes before something fully ends, it needs like a last tantrum, it's like sometimes you need to let it all out. And then once you let it out, it's over. And so I feel like this is like the last tantrum of like these old habits and patterns, because we're entering a new experience, but we still have the mental memory of the past, that's kind of colliding. We're kind of getting like the new and the old colliding, and we're trying to figure out how to work it all out and how to negotiate it all and how to find ourselves in this new space that we're going to be in this transition that's just been very difficult there. So do you see? And this is going to make the Mercury work, right? It's going to, the Mercury worse. It's going to throw us even more into those habits and patterns in order for us to really work through them and really work them out there. Okay. So do you see? Because we can't comprehend what's going on. It's like intense worry, doubt, insecurity, overworking, all of that. Okay, what now do I want to look at next? Well, now I want to switch over to more of the advice and more of the positives. One more. Now I want to switch over is really one more alignment is what's going on. That's actually a very good alignment. However, I want to note that I don't know if this alignment we're going to be feeling first, because an eclipse is such a big deal and such a big energy that we're going to feel the eclipse first. And the eclipse itself is a little bit of a challenge with the moon on the south node. So there is something good going on with this eclipse. I just think we're going to feel the challenging first. Not only do I want to say, I think we're going to feel the challenging first, but I think that as more time goes on past this eclipse, and as we learn how to work with it, we're going to start to see some of the goods come from it after. Hey, what is that? What is the advice? Let me just say a few things here. The first thing I want to talk about is going to be that, let's go back to the South Node Virgo thing before I add this last one. Sorry. The South Node can indicate letting things go, but it can also indicate fundamentally changing things to do them differently in a different and healthier way. So with the moon on the South Node, this can indicate letting go of anxiety, worry, overthinking, overwork, etc., or it can indicate changing that fundamentally. And I think I'm going to go with the changing that fundamentally, because I think there is still some things that need to be done in order to transition out of finally this old thing and into this new thing that's going on. So I think there's still some work that needs to be done. I think there's still some things that need to be thought through and some conversations. However, they don't need to be as intense or as detailed or as critical or as hard or as stressful. They need to be done more in flow, especially with all this Pisces energy and that being where the North Node is. So maybe that's what I'll say before I go to this last alignment is that, yeah, things are going quite fine to tie up all of this stuff that needs to be tied up and to transition out of it, but it's just not making sense to our logical mind for a lot of reasons, which is throwing us back into like overthinking and being too critical and working too hard and doing too much, right? Because we're worried that if we don't do enough, it's not going to finish. It's not going to go in the right way. That's happening. And what we really need to learn, what this full moon lunar eclipse is really trying to teach us, is not to go back to overworking, not to go back to overthinking, not to go too much in that direction. What this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo is trying to teach us is that, yeah, you probably need to think through some more things. You probably need to have some more conversations. You probably need to do some more work, but it doesn't need to be hard. You don't need to overdo it. It doesn't need to be a lot. And instead, it needs to be done more with ease, more flow, more trust, more surrender in order to allow these things to happen. Okay, that's what we're trying to learn. Okay, that then leads me now to this last alignment I'm going to mention, which is the fact that this full moon lunar eclipse is making a sextile to Jupiter in Cancer, which is making a trine to the sun as well, and to that North Node. And this is very positive because I consider a sextile and a trine positive aspects here that's going on. So this to me is very, very good. Okay, especially with Jupiter being involved. Jupiter is, many times considered gifts and good luck, and it's in Cancer, a sign of exaltation where it functions very, very well, better than anywhere else. So to me, this is very good. But again, like I said, this to me feels latent. We're going to get the frustrations first, and then this is going to come up after. Hey, what is this all about? Well, Jupiter is about wisdom and understanding. It's in Cancer, about our emotions. And the emotions have really been key to what we've been learning the past year, which is to honor more of our emotions that it is that we need. Not only is it going to bring more understanding about our emotions and this different direction we need to go in, but Cancer is also really about grounding, being the bottom of the chart, feeling more grounded, feeling more calm, nurturing ourselves, having to do with the moon, right? Ruled by the moon, the mother, nurturing ourselves here as well. Not only that, but Cancer is also about our intuition and our emotions, and Jupiter is going to expand that in a very positive way to help us get out of the logical mind, mind, get out of the overwork, not stay stuck there, and to get this bigger perspective on our life, and to trust more of our intuition, and with it being a water sign, like all this Pisces stuff, to go more with the flow, to allow more things to happen. To also, another thing about Cancer to me is a lot about the unknown, to not having all the answers, because it is the lowest part of the chart. It rules the midnight hour when things are very dark. It's us being more okay with like not having all the answers, or our logical mind like struggling to figure things out, and to kind of trust more kind of in the process. Not only that, but Cancer is about our foundation in life, to get more of a foundation in a different experience as we go throughout this transition. And again, I think that's going to happen. What's my final thought on this? I think my thought is, I think this is going to happen naturally, that we're going to realize I got some things to do and think through, but I can't do them overly hard on myself. I have to do them more in my flow. I think it's going to happen naturally, and that's going to blow our mind wide open and allow us to trust more, and to not have all the answers, and to experience totally different feelings about life, and to finally get more grounded in this space. I think it's going to happen more naturally on its own. I just don't think it's the first thing that's going to happen. That's the answer. This, I think, is going to happen more naturally on just not the first response. It's going to take a few days in order to get there. Another reason why I want to note, I think this is going to happen naturally on its own, because this is such a good aspect here, but also too, because this is not our first, eclipse on the South Node in Virgo. We had one last year. Okay. And that one brought up similar themes. And so I think another reason why we're eventually going to be able to come out of this, even if it's not like the first thing that we do, is because like we've already been practicing to not get stuck in the overwork and in the overthinking, even though it's tempting, right? And to come more out of it here, that I think will be good. So I think this is going to happen more naturally and easily. But if it doesn't, right, I'll give you the last piece of advice before we move on. If this doesn't happen naturally and easily, then the advice is to consciously choose, sure, to do things in your situation. Things probably still need to be done, but to not do them, to not overthink and to not overdo them, and to allow more room for serendipity and for flow, and to consciously choose to open your mind to like life being different, to there being more to life than what you originally thought and how you originally believed life would be, and experiencing life in a very different way, and to maybe not having all the answers, at least not in your conscious mind, right? Maybe your intuition might, but not in your conscious mind, to be more open to that as well, because that's going to make this situation a lot easier than it needs to be. Because again, remember, the situation is going fine. It's tying it up just fine. We're getting in our way. We're getting in our own way. Okay. So we need to stop getting in the way and let the situation take care of itself in the way that it needs to. Okay. And that's it. Because that's it. I'm just going to repeat all of that one last time without the jargon. So let me do that now. What I think is going on today is number one, I do that for another video. What I think is going on at this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo is that we are finally ready to move into a new and different experience of life that we've been trying to get to for quite some time, once and for all. And because of that, we're making a final firm decision that we need to finally let the past go and move forward, turning our life around in this different direction, which is in fact working to initiate a big now final transition out of the one thing into the other that's just now happening and requires a lot of letting go. And this transition that's being initiated is actually going quite nicely. Relationships and money are tying themselves up very easily without as much effort, as if on their own, with more grace and more compassion. But even though things are going very well and we're doing just fine, there's a part of ourselves, especially our logical mind, that's having a really hard time wrapping our mind around what's happening, around the fact that we're in this transition now out of one thing into another, and that it's happening so easily. Our logical mind doesn't understand why this transition is happening now when it's been so hard in the past, and doesn't understand why it's so easy, and thinks it should be a lot harder based on what we've been through, and feels like we're in a weird in-between space. And because our mind is having a hard time logically grasping a very good thing that's going on, we're falling back into worry and doubt and anxiety, maybe confusion, and we're complicating our situation by overthinking and overworking and doing too much and being too hard on ourselves and others, which can be very frustrating. I don't think it's going to ruin our situation, but can just be very frustrating and very agitating and kind of throw us for a loop. But I think from this frustration, we're all of a sudden or eventually going to realize that we don't need to be this way. We're eventually going to realize that things in our life are just fine and that we either need to stop overthinking and overworking or change the way that we're thinking and working to, yes, still get things done. Okay. But to do it in a way that's more in flow and that's more trusting and more surrendered to what's happening, which I think is then going to enable us to feel much better, feel more at ease, go a lot more with the flow, and expand our feelings and feel like more things are coming together in our life in a positive way that we need in order to move forward once and for all. Okay. And that's it. Okay. Hey, because that's it. Now what I like to do next is just say a few more things about this energy in a more conversational way to give you just another perspective of what might be happening. So I'm going to do that. What do I want to say? Okay. What I want to say is that really, I mean, either you can consider it either right at the time of this full moon in Virgo or right before we have done everything that needs to be done to end the past, to draw a firm line in the sand for the old things to be over and for the new to begin. So I think that's the first concept that I want to explain. And I'll say here, as of this full moon in Virgo, we have finally done every single thing that can be done and that needs to be done to end an old experience, right? And to get into a new experience of life. We finally done it. There is no more big decisions or huge big moves that really need to be done after this point. We've done them all, right? I mean, if you haven't done them yet, do them, right? But I'm sensing a turning point here. I'm sensing a turning point at this full moon, that somewhere around this full moon, we have done every single thing we can and need to do in order to transition out of one thing and into another. Okay. That then leads me to the next thing. Once you've done everything you can do, right? Once you've done every single thing you can do to get out of one thing and into another thing, what happens next? Well, you just wait. You just wait to let everything play out and resolve on its own. You know, that's really the answer. That's really what it is. When you've said, hey, I want this to end, I no longer want to do this anymore, and you've signed the papers and you've stamped everything and all of that, then what's left? Well, you got to wait for the paperwork to be in the mail, to go to whoever it needs to go through to finish the thing, right? Like you just need to wait. Or when you've told a company, well, I'm going to leave a job. I've given you my 2 weeks notice. I've signed something else with another company. You know, what do? You work the 2 weeks. You just have to wait. You just have to wait till the 2 weeks are over so you can move on, to your next job. There comes a point where after you've done every single thing that you can do and it's working, right? You just have to wait for things to play themselves out. Right? And it's not because what we're doing isn't working. It's not because what we're doing isn't the right thing. It's just because that's how things end sometimes, Like, are you understanding here? At this full moon in Virgo, we've finally done every single thing we need to do to end a new experience and get into a new one. That's good. That's working. It's working. I don't know if I mentioned that. It is working. It's good. Now, all we have to do is wait for it to play itself out and go through the motions. Okay, that's it. All right. And this is different. Maybe let me compare and contrast from December of last year, because December of last year, I remember giving a horoscope where I'm like, we've done everything, but nothing's working and nothing's coming together. And it's like, there's nothing we can do. It's different from that, because last December, the issue was like, we've done everything we can do, but nothing's happening. Well, that's different, because right now we've done everything we can do and things are happening. We've done everything we can do and things are happening. They are happening in the way that they're intended to be happening, in a good way to move us forward. Things are happening now in a good way. The issue now is not that they're not happening at all. It's not that nothing's changing. It's just that the process of changing, the process of things ending takes time. It just takes time. It takes time to get out of one thing into another. Okay. It takes time. And again, it takes going through the motions. And I think that that's the hard part at this full moon in Virgo for us to understand, especially for our mind to understand. Our mind doesn't understand, why do we have to wait for things to play themselves out? Why do we have to just go through the motions? Shouldn't there be more? Shouldn't there be more that I have to do to end this thing? Shouldn't this be harder to end this thing? Shouldn't I have to put in more effort to end this thing? Like, that's where the real issue is here. Do you see? We've done everything we can to end the old stuff we don't want anymore, and it's finally freaking working. And now all we have to do is just wait and let it take its own course and play out in the way that it needs, and just go through the motions without a whole lot of interfering, without a whole lot of effort. And that doesn't make sense to us. We're having a really hard time comprehending that. We feel like we should be doing more, or we feel like it should be harder than it is. Okay. Why do we feel like we should be doing more? Why do we feel like it should be harder than it is? I think that there's quite a lot of reasons for that. I don't know if I can be able to mention them all, but I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that, and I mentioned some of these as I was going through the aspects. I think one of the reasons is because we've been trying to do this for a long time. We've been trying to get out of one old thing we didn't like into another thing for a very, very long time. And it's been very hard for a very long time. So why now? Is it easy when we've been trying to do this for a long time and it's been very hard? Does not compute, does not make sense. There's a part of us that's like, A plus B does not equal C. We've been doing it for a long time. How does this? I don't get it. So that's one of the reasons why this is very difficult for us to logically accept. Not only that, but I think too, we still have a lot of conditioning from the past, from 2020, from before 2020, when Pluto was in Capricorn, of like, you have to work hard. You have to work harder. You're not valuable. You're not valuable. You're not worthy. You're not working hard enough. If you're not where you want to be, you're not working hard enough. You need to be working more, and there's a lot of things left over from the past of like guilt and shame if you're not working hard enough. We feel like I don't deserve things to be easy because I didn't earn them, because I didn't work hard enough. So I think there's also a lot of like past, habits, past, well, do I want to say past? Maybe I'll put that more as trauma. Yeah. Trauma, habits. There's a lot of past trauma and habits there. Well, maybe I'll put them as separate. That's what I want to do. There's a lot of past trauma from that, of like, I was taught for a lot of my life that if I wasn't working hard, that I didn't deserve things. And now that things are kind of just happening easily, I don't deserve it. So there's some trauma there around that from the past rearing its head. Not only that, but there's also just habit, right? I think that for so long we've been working hard to get to a certain place and to do a lot of things. And so I think now, it just is muscle memory. Old habits die hard. We've just been doing a lot of things for a very long time. And then to now all of a sudden things be easy, it doesn't. Even if we logically comprehend it, which I don't think we are, that we don't really need to do much. It's just like the muscle memory of it all. It's just like, well, I'm going to do it anyways because this is what I've been doing, So I think there's some of that. I think too, as well, is that this feels like a big moment in some way, shape. I think there is something that feels big or feels significant or feels kind of shaken up emotionally. I think that's going on as well. There's like a lot of feelings, kind of big feelings here as well, like a big transition. And I think that also is making it hard for us to stay kind of grounded and to understand what's going on and what's what. That's also making us a little confused and kind of behave and think in weird ways. I think there's also, this feels permanent. There's a permanence to what's going on as well. And so I think that's also hard too, for us to kind of comprehend, because sometimes when things feel more permanent, we get scared. Our logical mind gets scared because we don't have that flexibility, right? Mercury likes the flexibility. With it being retrograde, we don't have that flexibility that maybe we thought as well. And now we can't go back as much. So I think we're having a hard time really kind of coming to terms with that things are permanent, becoming more permanent and that we can't go back. I think another reason for it as well is like, is different parts of the cycle. I think that, right, we're now at the ending phase. We're now ending something, and ending something requires a different skill set than building something. Building something, sometimes, like if you want to consider this, tangibly, it is a lot of hard work when you're building something, one brick on top of another on top of another. But when you're dismantling something or ending something, it's less work, right? Walking up a hill is harder than walking down a hill, so there's more momentum when you're coming down the hill. So I think too, that we're kind of getting those parts confused because we've spent so much of our life trying to build something and now something's coming down. It requires a different skill set. So I think there's a lot of that, that's going on here at this time. So do you see, right? It's like we finally have done everything we've needed to get out of an old experience and into a new experience. And it's freaking working. It's freaking working. Okay. And it's working quite well. And because it's working and it's working quite well, all that we need to do is just like wait and be patient and just chill and just be there. Literally, we just need to be there. We don't even need to do much. We just need to be there and let it all happen naturally and easily on its own. And that's really hard for us. It's really hard for us because we can't logically comprehend why it's so easy after everything has been so hard. And because our emotions are all over the place and everything feels so permanent, and because we have some trauma from the past and some old habits and patterns that are really hard to break, making us feel like we need to do more, right? Or work harder, or you sabotage the situation that's going on. Okay. Okay. So I hope that's making sense. Things are fine. They're doing what they need to do. We just can't accept it. We feel like there's something wrong. For things to be this easy and to be there's got to be something wrong. We feel like there's got to be something wrong when there's not, because it's just not what we're used to. That is the problem. Okay. Anything else that I need to say in regards to this? And again, maybe some of you are like, why is it not requiring a lot of effort? Or like, why is it easier? Because again, right, like, I hope that metaphor of like walking down a hill is a lot easier than walking up a hill. When you're ending something, which is what we are, we're not having to climb this big mountain and do this big stuff. There's less strain on the muscles there, and because too, we've done a lot of work in the past. Maybe I need to say that we've done a lot of work in the past to get here. And when you've done a lot of work in the past, right, then the tests are easy. If you did all the work to study for the test, when you get the test is easy, and you don't have to strain so much in your brain because you kind of know what needs to be done. So I think that's another reason things are happening easily and naturally, because this is just the ending. Things are dissolving, and because we did all the work that we needed to do in the past to now make it happen kind of in this way and in order to get here. Any other thoughts? I thought I had one more on why this would be so easy. Yes, because I think the last reason, I think because we've already set the guardrails. I think over the course of the past few days before this full moon and weeks, we made firm decisions. We ended things. And when you make firm decisions, you set the guardrails. Yes to this, no to that. This is how it's going to be. This is how it's not going to be, right? And once you have the guardrail set of like, this is the final decision and this is how things are, all that's left is to like move within that, to move within those guardrails, those boundaries. It's not reinventing the whole thing, right? We've already made the final decisions. It's not like, oh, well, let's renegotiate this. And maybe we can go here. It's like, no, I said what was going to happen and I said what I wanted to happen. And now we just have to do it. So we've already kind of done that as well, which is why it's so easy. Do you see that we're having the hard time accepting? Okay. That's going on here. Our situations don't need a heavy hand to finish resolving themselves. They just need time and for us to be present and for us to allow and go with the flow as they work themselves out. Are you understanding? And you got to stop your logical mind from getting in the way and telling you otherwise. Not only do I want to say that, but I also want to note as well that even though I do believe that there is this struggle, even though I do believe there is this struggle at this full moon going on where we're just in logical disbelief that this is so easy and it's happening, and where I need to know where we're doubling down on the overthinking and the overwork and all of that. But I think that even though it's happening, we're going to get out of it. Even though it's happening, we are going to be able to, at some point around this full moon and lunar eclipse in Virgo, pick ourselves out of the negative manifestations so that we can get more of a positive version of this lunar eclipse. And I think we're going to be able to do it by recognizing. I think we're going to recognize by becoming conscious of this pattern that's playing out and of stopping it. And I think we're going to become more conscious and recognize and stop it ourselves, because this is a full moon. Remember, bright illuminations. Full moons bring something to light. They illuminate something that we couldn't see, which is our habits that are not good here in our logical mind. Mercury is also about to conjunct the sun during its retrograde period after this, which is a very good thing, illuminating something as well. So I think we're going to get clarity on it. Not only that, but again, this is not the first lunar eclipse on the south node, or the first eclipse on the south node in Virgo. We've had one before. We've been through this. We have experience. We've seen this happen before. So we have the experience of kind of how to handle it and what to do. And of course, the full moon is making that good aspect to Jupiter and Cancer. There is more of that trust there too, because we've been learning how to have some of that trust and faith for all along. So that's where I'm getting here. Made a final decision to finally end old things and get into new things, which is a great one. Finally working, things adjusting themselves really easily and naturally around that decision, which is beautiful, but having a hard time logically comprehending this good thing that's going on, because feels like it doesn't make logical sense, and like it should be so easy, making us want to make things harder and overcomplicate and overthink and overwork and be too critical and worry and anxiety and in doubt. That's going on. That can be hard, but that I think we're naturally going to pick ourselves out of at some point, because we're going to get clarity on how unhelpful these behaviors are. And because we've been this rodeo before and we've learned the lessons and are not going to allow ourselves to fall backward, and are going to choose another path and are going to choose to do things differently, which is in that way that's more allowing and more in flow of what needs to happen. I also want to note too, I did say this in my last horoscope, but I think it still applies, that there's not really anything you can do to screw this up. Even if you did do something with the Mercury alignment because you're worried and you can't comprehend, even if you did do something stupid or ridiculous, I don't think it's going to change anything. Really, I think things are going to wrap themselves up anyways. And I think we're still in the process of that. This full moon in Virgo, we just need to more fully come to terms with our fears and anxieties and hesitations and our issues with our logical mind surrounding all of that. Anything else? Okay, I think that's it. Here. What else? Do I want to give you some examples? Sure, I'll give you some examples before we look at your inside degrees. One of the examples I did kind of just give you, right? Like, think about ending a job. Right? A lot of times when you end a job, you usually have to give them 2 weeks notice. That's usually what's socially acceptable, I suppose. So to use that example, I think some of you may have literally given your job like a 2 weeks notice very recently, that you want a permanent decision to end that job and to leave. And so now what's going on is there's you just need to wait for the 2 weeks to be over. You still sure need to go to work and do things, but you don't have to do a lot. It doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to overthink it, right? You're on your way out. You know what I mean? Just be there to do what they need to, push some papers around and connect with some people and then go, it's like, that's the kind of situation there. You're on your way out. You don't need to overwork to prove, you're leaving. Just show up, get the stuff done and go, and keep it easy and keep it simple and don't overthink it, right? Like, that's a big example of what could be going on here. Or maybe to go back to the job thing, maybe if it's not like leaving a company per se, maybe some of you are transitioning out of one job within the same company and into another one. And maybe the company has already given you permission to do that. They've already set your date for when that will happen, which to me feels a few weeks from now. And now you're kind of in this in-between phase of like, okay, I'm moving into this new branch in the company in this new position, but it just hasn't happened yet. And that can create a lot of worry and anxiety. Well, maybe I need to work more. Maybe I need to do this. Or what if they don't like me? Or what if they think I'm not doing enough? Or how does this make sense? And no, you just need to chill and just still do the job. Okay. Don't overdo it and just wait until the day comes for you to move in the other position. Or say maybe if you're a business owner or something and you're trying to transition your business out of one thing that you used to do to make money into another. Well, what could be happening is that you could have already made the decision of, I'm going to stop doing this thing to make money and I'm going to start doing another thing. Okay. Eventually, maybe you've picked a date for when that might occur. And what's happening right now is you just have to take care of all the little details to stop doing that one thing. Right? Because if you made a decision to stop making money in one way, I'm sure there's things you got to tie up. There's probably people you got to notify to say, hey, I'm not doing this thing anymore. Maybe there's accounts you got to cancel. Maybe there's people you got to refund to give their money back, right? Right? So that could be some of you too. You're transitioning out of making money in one way in your business and into another, but the transition out of one way does require a little bit of work. You have to refund some people, you have to send some emails, but that work doesn't have to be hard. That work doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to overthink that. All you have to do is just follow the motions. Okay? Easy, follow the motions and let it happen. Allow it to happen so that you can move into something else. Okay? Right? Or maybe you're in between jobs for a minute. Maybe you've left a job already, a few weeks ago, and maybe you've got another job that you're hoping to find or that's coming up, but it doesn't start quite yet. It starts in a few weeks. And so maybe you're in between jobs, and maybe what's happening now is you're starting to get a little worried and you're starting to, get a little worried. Well, the new job hasn't started yet. Well, what do I do in this in between time? I'm worried about money in this in between time. And maybe you'll start to get to thinking or feeling like you need to pick up another job instead, or doing all this crazy stuff. It can create a situation like that as well. And it's like, stop it. Things are going just fine. You're leaving one job, you're starting another. There's no need to get a third job. There's no need to stress yourself out. All you have to do is just wait and chill and relax. And just go through the motions until this next one comes into being. Could be something like that. If it's not that, right, could be a home situation. So maybe this is a situation where you sold your home a few months ago, right, to use very similarly, but you haven't quite moved into the new home yet. That's going on. So maybe you could be in this weird in-between space, this transition out of one and into the other. And maybe there can be a lot of anxiety of like, oh my gosh, am I really going to sell this? Am I really going to be able to move in? What if something goes wrong? What if something happens? And freaking out. And it's like, no, you're fine. All you have to do is just wait for the new home to be, to be available for you to move in, and just go through the motions of signing the paperwork, whatever you need to do in order to get there. So it could be something like that. Or maybe there's a home renovation. Maybe you made a plan to like renovate something in your home, and you've got they're coming in and they're renovating the home, but it's a process. It's going to take them a few weeks to finish renovating. And maybe they're renovating and it's actually going quite smoothly and you actually like what they're doing. And maybe during the renovation, because it's going so smoothly and easily, you're all of a sudden getting scared. Well, what if they mess it up? Well, why is it so easy? Well, maybe I should make this harder. Maybe I should add more things on, And it's like, just chill and enjoy it and let it be easy. And like, do other things, let's go with the flow, right? Pisces, fish, go with the flow of ease instead of against the flow of ease. The flow wants to go easy. The flow wants to end things, allow things to end, allow things to go in a different direction, and stop trying to go against the flow by recreating what was and making things harder. Okay. So I think there could be some of that's happening. Right. Or maybe it's a different situation with your home. Maybe some of you have family coming to visit for a while in your home. That is going to happen a few weeks from now. And so maybe you're trying to transition your home to have a nice space for them to live in. And maybe that's going fine, but and then all of a sudden you're like, why is it so easy? Nothing with my family is easy, and like start to get worried there, so it could be something along those lines. There maybe could be, what else? Yeah, I'd like that. Maybe to give you back an example on the money, the business, maybe some of you are transitioning out of one way of making money into another, but maybe it's so easy, even though you do have to send some emails, right, that it's scaring you. So it could be some situations like that. Okay, let's go to like a relationship situation. Maybe some of you are ending a relationship with someone. Maybe you've already filed for divorce. Maybe that divorce has already been approved. You know what I mean? But maybe what is happening now over the course of the next few weeks is that you just need to get your stuff from your ex's house, and, you just need to divide up some of your, stuff, or whatever, just have a few more conversations about the childcare. And maybe it's going kind of so easy that you're like, wait, something must be wrong. And you're getting nervous and anxious. It could be something like that that's happening. Or maybe there's a new relationship that you've met, that you've been meeting, and maybe that relationship is actually going quite well with this new person, but maybe it's going well and going so easy that you're like, shoot, something's going to go wrong. Why is it so easy? It shouldn't be easy. All relationships for me have been hard. I got to screw it up. I got to do something stupid now. So it could be like something like that could kind of come up, and it's like, just chill, just enjoy the moment. It's going fine. Just let it take its course. Sometimes you just need to go through the motions to get to know each other a little bit longer, and then things will go to the next level, So it can just be situations like that there as well, right? Or maybe to give you a health example, maybe you've been taking maybe there's some kind of better health treatment you've been on, or you just made a decision to get on, and maybe that health thing is going actually quite well, but maybe you are feeling weird about it. Maybe because it's going so well, you're like, this is strange. It shouldn't be going this well. Nothing goes this well for me. I've had so many problems with my health for so long. Why is this happening? And then get nervous and anxious and can't comprehend and, try to do more than you need with the health and overdo it. It could just be little things like that go on, that you're going to have to realize everything's fine and just chill. Okay. You're not going to screw it up anyways. No matter what you do, you're not going to screw up anyways, but just going with the flow will make it a lot easier on you anyways. Okay. I think that's all I'm going to say there. Now what I'm going to do is look at your inside degrees. So let's go over that. The inside degrees were not written by me. They were written by someone else named Elias Lonsdale, who channeled the meanings of each of the degrees from spirit, but I find them interesting. So I like to look at them. So we're going to do that. Here, this full moon lunar eclipse is at 12 degrees Virgo, but the degree before, of, and after can all be relevant. So we'll take a look at those. Here, let's do 11 Virgo. Innocence has its way to persist. You can grow up, yet retain the stance of the novice, the beginner, the wonder worker. You foster a knack for renewing your original basic values and way of being at every critical juncture, a quality unique and unmistakable. So one thing I like about this is about beginning again, right? The novice, the beginner. And I think there is something that is going on right now in our lives where we are in a process of transitioning into a new beginning. Okay. Right, which this to me confirms. Okay. Right, and things are renewing themselves. Let's read on. It says, at any age and within all situations, coming at things as though we all just got here and we were simply trying things on for size. Okay, another thing that I want to say, sorry, that made me think of something as well, is that I think there's a lot of like unlearning that's going on. Pisces. I know that this eclipse is on Virgo. And we're reading into Virgo degree, but with Pisces being the last sign of the zodiac, in some ways it can be about unlearning things. And Pisces does have a lot to do with wisdom, right? And in unlearning the dogmatic beliefs so that we can learn the higher beliefs. And even the South Node in Virgo can be a lot about letting go of our ideas and our preconceived notions. So I think there's also something else that beginning again, which I think we're transitioning into a new beginning, requires a lot of forgetting, or if not forgetting, a lot of changing your mindset and changing your beliefs, because what worked for the past won't work for the future. And you kind of have to unlearn a lot of things that used to work in order to get to something new that will work and to learn how to work with the new thing better. So I think there's something there. The best of this quality is a sticking to prenatal resolves of a lofty integrity that refuses steadfastly to fall under the weight of the critical mind. Okay. The worst of this quality is that in its zeal, its dedication, and its self-insistency, it invariably puts others to shame and generates in others the self-conscious and self-judgment you are yourself bypassing. So here we are in this degree, we get the sense of like the logical mind kind of being a thought here of like, we're not under the weight of the logical mind. We're trying to resist. Right? We're trying to, and that was a theme that we talked about of like the logical mind is not there, is playing tricks on us. But look, we're trying to resist. We're trying there, and there's so many planets in Pisces, right? There's a Pisces stellium going on here. So even though the Virgo is trying to bring us into the logical mind, see, there's also a tendency to like want to resist it as well. So right? So what I'm getting from this degree is that we're stepping into kind of a new beginning, which requires a different way of thinking and understanding that might have us unlearn a lot of other things that we've learned And a very good thing about beginnings is that we don't get into our logical mind and we're trying to resist that. Okay. And it says too, it says the worst of this quality of like beginnings and all of that is that in its zeal and dedication, we put others to shame. A lot of zeal, a lot of excitement. I think sometimes excitement can get the best of us, or sometimes so many things happening at once, or a few things happening at once that feel so big can create a lot of emotions that can be hard to stay balanced and to kind of stay in that space that we need to stay in that's not in the logical mind. Yeah. It says, therefore, what is good for yourself proves to be bad for others and results in a quandary, a confusing and puzzling situation, eventually impelling you to add one borrowed ingredient, the ability to take yourself lightly. There is some stuff here about relationships, right? Maybe some people are trying to extrapolate their life experience to other people's life experience, but I'm not sure if I'm feeling so much the negative stuff with the relationships, because this interpretation is just for the degree of Virgo. It can't see that Venus is in Pisces right now where it's exalted. And Saturn's in Aries and Neptune, which is more of a individual influence and less so much about relationships. So I don't get so much of a negative relationship vibe from this. I feel like this is more of our own issues. Maybe it's our own issues we're projecting onto others, but I think there's some of that. Okay. New experiences, we got to think in new ways without the logic and unlearn a lot of we had before, and kind of unlearning the way we were before and doing things differently has its benefits, like trusting more of the magic, but also has its not benefits because we can get so caught up in the emotions of it that we start to kind of act crazy. Let's read on. Virgo 12, searching for clues, you probe the straight line and the intricate curve, tapping the mind's powers for intricate operations, prone to find the pathological, the destructive, and the inverted, the bloodhound sleuth, checking everything out everywhere, curious, fascinated, alive with speculation, hunches, and notions. Okay, so there's something very probing about this, a lot of details, which to me is where we start to get that logical mind coming back, which is interesting because we just kind of had blown it wide open in Virgo 11, right? Where we weren't so much in the logical mind. And now all of a sudden the logical mind is coming back after the emotions got out of sorts. Searching for clues. Yeah. Being like, and this also too, like the bloodhound sleuth, to me, this also indicates that we're trying to search for something wrong when nothing's wrong, right? The bloodhound sleuth, something's so easy. Something's got to be wrong here. I got to sleuth it out. I got to look for it. And it's like, no, things are fine. Nothing's wrong, even if it feels like it. Well, yeah, things may definitely feel wrong, but things are better than, maybe I don't want to say nothing's wrong, right? Because all our situations are different, but things I believe are better than they might seem. Okay. Where do I want to go? Wanting to track something down, to get resolution, needing to know, poking about in the dark. You possess remarkable senses and are almost purely telepathic minded, tremendously skilled and adroit, but you can get poisoned by skepticisms and by too heavy an exposure to the dark underbelly of things. So I like here about resolution, ending something. I like it says here that there is, something about getting to the bottom of things that you're skilled at, but I also like that it says that there's, too heavy an exposure to the dark, right? Too focused on the negative. In other words, too focused on the negative without that hope and faith that things are going to be okay. Desperate to learn how to also accept and embrace all that is unconditionally, to let go into rightfulness and goodness in the very thick of things being rotten and pervasively wrong. Yeah, I definitely feel that last line. So to me, this degree is like, because we kind of let our emotions out to play and they got kind of crazy, then we fell back into that critical thinking, feeling like something has to be wrong, the more negative side of things when things are actually going okay. And we're going to have to let go of that negative worst case scenario thinking and to embrace what is happening and trust that it's going to be okay. And that from the rot of our past experience, that something better is ultimately going to emerge. And then we've got The last degree, Virgo 13, peppery, fiery, contentious, and spoiling for a fight. Born ready, shot from a cannon, one of a kind. Volatile in the far extreme, convinced of things, taking sides, even inventing them. You are impelled by the polarized consciousness to be so fiercely partisan that the destructive overwhelms the constructive. Incited to riot by what is wrong with the world. Not reconciled, not accepting, not at peace. So there's something here about this of like, when you take that negative to an extreme, when you take that fear of like something's too easy, something's got to be wrong, this is too easy, something's got to be wrong, of just how volatile that can be, of like how hard that can be, and what that can create. Self-righteous and headstrong. In perfect moments, ebullient and magnificent, and the most charming a being can be. Much of the time you are feuding and bickering and blindly consumed by the lower mind. Keenly good at self-deception, the world's best at blind self-fidelity, the perfect promoter of the unpopular cause. But you feel tormented by the way in which all of this perpetuates itself and cannot find freedom. You search for a way through. Okay. I'm definitely feeling this degree in terms of the collective for a long time, but I feel like we're kind of coming out of that. I'm feeling more 12 degrees, I have to say. To me, resonates the most with what I think that this degree is, and that is the exact degree that the full moon's at. So I think that's what I have to say there. I don't know if that added too much for me this time, even though I do love these inside degrees, other than just new beginnings are coming, but it's requiring us to unlearn everything we thought kind of we knew about life and how to behave. That's just very hard. And that's creating a lot of weird emotions because we don't have a lot of these old things to rely on, and especially making us suspicious of what's happening. Okay. And we got to not go down that negative route. And just have hope and faith that things are working themselves as they need to be, because they are, and sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes when something is ending and a new thing's beginning, it just takes time and faith. It doesn't really need a whole lot. So that's what I'll say. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pull your card. I'm using the Crystal Unicorn Tarot by Pamela Chen today. All right. We got to stop making up worst case scenarios in our mind and trust that things are going well, because this is the end of a journey into a new one, and we're going to be fine. Okay. Your card is the Hermit, which is funny. Isn't that Virgo's card? Oh my gosh. Did we just get the star? I think we got the star 2 weeks ago for the eclipse in Aquarius, which correlates to the star. And then this eclipse, we get the Hermit. If you can't really read it, that's right. I think it's more in focus down here. Anyways, the Hermit. And then at the bottom of the deck, we've got the Five of Pentacles upright. I mean, the Five of Pentacles to me definitely indicates that maybe some of us are feeling a little out in the cold, worry and anxiety. Maybe there's especially some financial concerns. But look, the Hermit is usually solitary, as he is in this card, and is usually in a peaceful place. That's a lot about calm, finding our inner calm, and really living from that place. And so I think that's my thought. Maybe we're worried. I think there's a lot of imagining worst case scenarios going on in our situation as we make this transition, and we need to calm down our mind so that it doesn't let us get the best of it, and find calm, peaceful places within ourselves to stay more grounded. Another thing too is that usually the Hermit is carrying a lantern, like he is in this card, and the lantern can symbolize like hope and faith and trusting in the path. It can also symbolize like seeing one step ahead at a time, because the lantern only lights like the step in front of you, and to trust that you don't need to know all the answers, just one step ahead at a time is good. Another thing that this can also indicate as well is sometimes I'm getting a sense of like a ritual, especially, Virgo can be like that. Maybe some of you might need, in order to calm your emotions throughout this process, some sort of ritual to keep you grounded. This can be meditation or getting back to it if you haven't been doing it for a while. It can be, journaling in the morning. It can be, going to the park every morning. Maybe some of you might need just a little bit of like a ritual for the next few weeks. You don't have to do it permanently, just for the next few weeks to go to keep you grounded when you feel these negative emotions coming up here, so that they don't get the best of you. So I think there's a lot of that going on. Some of you may feel really worried and anxious. Remain calm. Meditation, ritual, grounding, have faith. Only focus on just the next step, one step at a time. Anything else? Yeah, maybe some of you too with the Five of Pentacles are like, no, I'm looking at my situation. It doesn't look like relationships and money are going, are going that well. And I think there's a thought that's like, I think there's something happening better than some of you might see right now. If you don't see things, if you don't think things are going well, right, in your life, then I think that there's something going better than we can see right now. So keep that in mind too, that if you're just in the down and out at this time, realize there's something that maybe you can't see that's working out in your favor behind the scenes, especially with all the Pisces. And of course that trine to Jupiter and Cancer, all the water. Water can indicate the spirit realms, the intuition, maybe even the things we can't see kind of conspiring in our favor, especially because we've got some good things going on here as well. And to remain hopeful that by the time it all shakes out, there's going to be something good for you at the end of it all. Another thought too, before we go, is that when is this process of like closure gonna finish itself, of like taking care of all these little last details and things that really don't need a lot of effort? It's probably going to be till about Aries season, right? That's the astrological new year, new beginnings, fresh start. So it's probably going to take you till then, which is what, a month and a half, 6 weeks away. So it's probably going to take you 6 weeks, to tie up these things now. But again, they don't need a lot of effort. You do have to do them. You do have to be present, but to tie up some of these old things, but you don't have to do a whole bunch of effort in order to get the goods. You just have to go with it and allow it to happen to get the best result. So that's what I'll say there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that was helpful. I wish you all the best this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo, and I will talk to you at the next new moon, which will be in Pisces 2 weeks from now.